The sun burned brightly in the sky, its harsh rays reflecting off the endless stretches of golden sand. On this desert planet, the weather was as unforgiving as the landscape itself. The winds howled through the dry air, carrying with them tiny particles of dust that stung the skin like tiny needles. For days, there had been no shelter in sight, and the storm that had begun to brew seemed to grow stronger by the hour. The alien woman, traveler by nature, had long ago lost count of the days she'd been stranded here. Her people, a nomadic species, were used to the harsh conditions of desert planets, but even they could not survive in this endless expanse for long without proper shelter. Her throat felt dry, and her body ached from the constant struggle to stay on her feet. The storm was growing, its winds now kicking up the sand in furious waves, making it nearly impossible to see beyond the next few steps. She had been caught in this sandstorm while attempting to cross the desert, hoping to reach a distant settlement. But the storm had come out of nowhere, powerful and sudden, trapping her in its chaos. The air was thick, and the dust swirled around her like a living thing. It was a fight just to stay upright as the sand threatened to pull her down, burying her in its depths. Her thoughts were clear, but her body was beginning to grow tired. She needed to find shelter fast, through the haze of dust and the swirling chaos of the storm. Her eyes caught a glimpse of something in the distance, a dark shape against the horizon, half hidden by the waves of sand. It was small, almost invisible, but it was there. She couldn't afford to ignore it. Shelter. The thought sparked a flicker of hope. Inside her, the alien woman moved with purpose, forcing her body forward with every ounce of strength she had left. Her legs felt heavy, her breathing shallow. Wind screamed in her ears, drowning out everything else, but she pressed on, eyes fixed on the shelter ahead. As she stumbled forward, she couldn't help but think of how alone she was. She had not seen another living creature for weeks. The isolation of the desert was consuming, and now, the storm seemed like nature itself was trying to erase her from existence. Her thoughts drifted back to her home, to her people, those who were still out there, somewhere beyond the stars. She wondered how they were surviving, if they were surviving at all. The shape ahead grew larger as she approached, and the wind seemed to fight against her every step, as if it was trying to drag her back into the storm. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she reached the shelter. It was small, just a simple structure built into the side of a rocky outcrop, barely noticeable if you didn't know what you were looking for. The storm howled around her as she reached for the door, her hands shaking with exhaustion, and with a final burst of energy, she pulled the door open and staggered inside. The shelter was a welcome relief from the storm. The interior was dark and cool, a stark contrast to the blistering heat outside. She stepped inside, her body sagging with relief as the door clicked shut behind her. For a moment she simply stood there, letting the storm rage outside while she took in deep breaths, trying to steady her pulse as her vision cleared. She realized that the shelter was not as abandoned as she had first thought. There was movement in the next room, faint, but unmistakable. Her heart skipped a beat. Was someone else here? Slowly, carefully, she crept forward, her senses heightened, her every movement cautious. She wasn't sure what to expect. Had someone else been trapped by the storm? Or was this a trap? Something set up by an enemy or scavengers? Her mind raced with possibilities, but she pushed them aside. She needed answers. She peeked into the next room, her eyes scanning the space. And there, standing in the shadows, was a figure, human man. He was looking at her with wide eyes, clearly just as surprised to see her as she was to find him. For a moment, neither of them moved. The air between them was thick with disbelief. Humans. She had thought them extinct. Her people had long told stories of the human race, of a once great civilization that had disappeared from the stars, leaving only fragments of their history scattered across the galaxy. She had never expected to encounter one. The human man stood frozen, his eyes locked onto hers, his mouth slightly open. The silence stretched, but neither of them spoke. She wasn't sure what to say. She had never met a human before, but the Man was equally speechless, his expression filled with shock, confusion, and a hint of fear. Finally, the silence was broken by the man's voice, rough and hesitant. You're real? She blinked, not sure how to respond. I thought. Humans were extinct. His face twisted in confusion before he slowly nodded. I thought the same about your kind. He took a step forward, his gaze never leaving hers. But it looks like we're both wrong. For a long moment, neither of them said anything more. Alien woman stared at him, trying to process the impossibility of the situation. Human, alive, and not just any human, but one who had survived in this desolate place alone. How did you survive? She asked, her voice quieter now. The planet, the war, everything. The man's eyes grew darker and a faint sadness crossed his face as he spoke. It's a long story. For now, I'm just glad you're here. The alien woman didn't know what to say to that. Her mind was racing, trying to piece together the situation. But for now, there was one thing she knew for certain. She wasn't alone anymore. The alien woman stood still in the doorway, her mind still trying to process the sight of the human standing before her. He was taller than she had imagined, with dark hair that seemed to catch the dim light in strange ways. His face was rough and worn, as if life on this harsh planet had taken its toll. Yet there was a certain calmness in his eyes, a quiet strength that made her feel, oddly enough, safe. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself after the shock of this unexpected encounter. The storm outside still raged, but here, in the shelter, it was calm. Silence between them stretched on, neither of them quite sure what to do next. Finally, the human spoke again, his voice quiet but steady. I didn't expect to find anyone else here. I thought I was the last. The alien woman nodded slowly. I thought the same about your kind. I didn't think any humans survived. The man shifted slightly, looking unsure of how to continue. I know. Most people thought Earth was destroyed long ago. I did too, but I ended up here, alone. His words seemed heavy with years of solitude. The alien woman could see the loneliness in his eyes, the weight of living in a world without companionship. She knew that feeling all too well, even though her people had once traveled in groups, never truly alone. To be stranded in a place like this, surrounded only by the endless desert and the sound of the wind, it was something she could understand. You've been here for long? She asked, her voice gentle. The man hesitated, then nodded. Too long. I lost count. Years, I think. He let out a small, tired laugh. I guess you could say I've gotten used to it. The alien woman could feel the weight of his words. She couldn't imagine living like that, days blending into weeks, weeks into months. The loneliness, the silence. It was almost too much to bear. For a moment, they both stood in silence, listening to the storm outside. It was as if the world itself had gone quiet, waiting for them to figure out what to do next. Finally, the alien woman spoke again, her voice breaking the silence. I'm sorry for what you've been through. The man looked at her, his expression softening. It's not your fault. You didn't do this. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she turned her attention to the shelter. Around them, the small room was filled with the faint smell of dust and old metal. There were remnants of old technology scattered about, broken devices and machines that had clearly been abandoned for a long time. It looked as though no one had been here in ages. She couldn't help but wonder what had happened to the person. Who had once lived here? Had they been another survivor? Had they been lost to the desert like so many others? The thought lingered in her mind, but she pushed it aside. There was something more pressing to focus on now. She glanced back at the human, who was still standing near the entrance, looking as if he didn't know what to do with himself. I need water, she said, the dryness in her throat suddenly making her realize how thirsty she was. Do you have any? The man's eyes brightened and he quickly nodded. Yeah, I've got some. It's not much, but I can share. He moved toward a small corner of the room, where a few containers lay stacked in neat piles. He grabbed a small metal bottle, unscrewed the cap, and handed it to her. The alien woman took the bottle gratefully, unscrewing the cap and taking a long drink. The cool water felt like life itself running through her, soothing her parched throat and calming her tired body. She drank deeply until the bottle was nearly empty, and then handed it back to the man. "Thank you," she said, feeling a strange sense of gratitude. She hadn't realized how much she had needed it until now. The man nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "You're welcome. It's the least I can do." For a moment, the alien woman looked at him. Really? Seeing him for the first time, there was something about him, something resilient. Despite the loneliness, despite the years spent in isolation, he had managed to survive. His presence here in the shelter was proof of that. He hadn't given up. It reminded her of herself, of her own people who had learned to survive on harsh planets like this one. She had never been truly alone, though. Her people had always been there, ready to lend a hand, offer support. But now, here in this shelter, it was different. It was just her and this human man. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel quite so alone. She decided to break the silence again. "Do you have a plan for what's next?" The human man shrugged, his shoulders heavy with the weight of years spent without hope. "Not really. I've been trying to survive, trying to make sure I don't lose my mind out here, but it gets harder. Every day, I don't know what to do anymore." The alien woman felt a pang of sympathy for him. She could understand that. The thought of surviving without a purpose, without knowing what lay ahead, it was terrifying. It made her feel as though she was drifting, lost in a vast empty sea. "We could try to fix the communication system," she suggested, her voice more determined now. "Maybe we can send out a signal. If there are others, they'll hear it. We might not be alone after all." The man's eyes brightened at the idea, and, for the first time since she had met him, he looked like he might believe in something again. "You really think that's possible?" The alien woman smiled, a flicker of hope lighting in her eyes. "It's worth trying." The storm outside had died down, but the air inside the shelter felt still, as if the building itself was holding its breath. The alien woman stood near the small makeshift table, her hands resting on a dusty panel of old technology. The human man, who had been silent for a while, now sat on a nearby chair watching her work. "Do you think it will work?" he asked, his voice filled with a mix of hope and uncertainty. She didn't look up immediately. Her fingers moved across the controls, trying to make sense of the broken machinery. It had been abandoned for years, perhaps longer, and there was no guarantee that it would still function. But the idea of sending out a signal of reaching someone, anyone kept her going. She had to try. "It has to," she said quietly, her voice more to herself than to him. "We can't stay here forever. If there are others out there, we need to find them." The man nodded, his gaze distant. "Yeah, I guess you're right, but what if we're the only ones left? What if it's just us now?" The alien woman paused, her fingers resting on the panel. His words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of their meaning. She wanted to say something comforting, to tell him that there was always hope, that there were always survivors. But the truth was, she didn't know. Her people had spoken of Earth's destruction, of how the humans had vanished without a trace. She had never imagined she would find one alive, let alone stranded in the same place as her. Turning her attention back to the controls, she tried a few more commands. The panel sparked to life, flickering with faint lights. A small but noticeable smile spread across her face. "It's working," she said, her voice filled with satisfaction. The man stood up, a look of surprise crossing his features. "No way. You did it?" She nodded, her eyes focused on the screen. "It's not much, but it's something. I've sent out a basic distress signal. If anyone is out there, they'll hear it." The man moved closer, peering over her shoulder at the screen. He let out a soft laugh, though it was tinged with disbelief. "I can't believe it." "You really think someone will come?" "I have to believe," the alien woman replied, her tone soft but firm. "We don't know if we're the last ones, but we won't know unless we try." He nodded slowly, his eyes still on the screen, as if willing the signal to reach someone. The silence stretched between them again, but this time it was different. It wasn't uncomfortable. There was a shared understanding, an unspoken bond between them. The storm outside might have taken away everything they knew, but inside this shelter, they had found something they hadn't expected each other. After a few minutes, the man cleared his throat, breaking the silence. So, now that we've done that, what happens next? The alien woman glanced at him, then back at the screen. Now we wait. We need to stay near the console in case we get a response. But we also need to be ready to move, just in case the storm picks up again. He thought for a moment before replying, I don't mind waiting. It's been a long time since I've had anyone to talk to. Her gaze softened at his words, knew what he meant. The loneliness of being stranded in a place like this, in a desolate planet with no one around, could drive anyone to the edge. But she didn't say anything. Instead, she stood up and walked over to the small supply cupboard. In the corner, I have some food, she said, pulling out a few dried rations. We'll need to stay strong if we want to make it through whatever comes next. He looked at the food and then back at her. How long have you been traveling alone? He asked, his voice curious. The question took her by surprise, but she didn't hesitate in answering. For a while, my people move from planet to planet, but sometimes we get separated. This time I was cut off from my group. I've been trying to find them for weeks. He nodded slowly, his face thoughtful. I understand. It's not easy being alone, especially when you don't know if anyone else is out there. The alien woman set the rations down between them and sat across from him. No, it's not easy, but we survive. We have to. He smiled, a small but genuine smile. I guess that's all any of us can do, survive? The alien woman returned the smile. Though it was brief, survive and keep hoping. The man reached for the rations and tore one open, taking a small bite. So, where do you think your people are? You said you were separated from them. Do you think they're still out there? She hesitated, considering the question carefully. I hope so. I've heard stories, legends, about humans and their strength. My people were always told that humans could never be defeated. That even if they were gone, their legacy would live on. The man's eyes darkened for a moment. That sounds a lot like what I was told. That we were all gone. That Earth was just a memory. She looked at him closely, seeing the sorrow in his eyes. You don't believe that, do you? He shook his head. I don't know. I want to believe, but it's hard. I've been here for so long. I can't even remember what it felt like to be part of something bigger. I can't remember what it was like to feel like I belonged. The alien woman felt a pang of sympathy for him. She understood that feeling of isolation, of being lost and disconnected. But there was something in his voice, something that told her he wasn't giving up. He might have lost hope once, but now, with her presence here, it seemed like there was a chance for something more. We're not alone anymore, she said softly, meeting his eyes. We have each other now. For a moment, the man was silent. Then he nodded slowly, as if her words had settled deep within him. Yeah, I guess we do. The days that followed were quiet, and the shelter became a place of refuge for the alien woman and the human man. The storm had passed, but the desert still lay outside, its vast emptiness stretching for miles. Inside the shelter, however, it felt like the world had slowed down. Distress signal had been sent, and now they could only wait for a response. Silence of waiting was different from the silence of being alone. For the first time in a long while, the alien woman didn't feel the weight of isolation pressing down on her. She shared meals with the man, and they spoke about their worlds, their pasts, and their hopes for the future. They weren't close yet, but the bond between them was beginning to take shape. The human man, whose name she learned was Ethan, had shared much of his story with her. His voice had trembled slightly when he spoke of Earthov, the planet that had once teemed with life, now only a distant memory. He told her about the wars, the destruction, and how he had ended up on this desert world. Though the story was long, she could tell it was one he had told himself many times before. It was a tale of survival, but also of loss. For her part, the alien woman shared little about her own past. She told him that she was from a distant star system, a place where her people had lived for generations. They had traveled to many worlds, always moving, always learning. But this place was different. She had never encountered a human before, and the thought of them being extinct had never truly crossed her mind. To see one alive, To know that Earth was not entirely lost was both a surprise and a relief. One evening, as the sun set over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, the two sat together by the small window, looking out over the desert. The air outside had grown cooler and the sounds of the storm had died away. The stars were beginning to emerge in the darkening sky, each one a tiny light in the endless night. "I've been thinking," Ethan said, his voice breaking the quiet. "If we can find a way off this planet, you think you could get back to your people?" The question hung in the air between them. The alien woman didn't answer immediately. She stared out at the stars, her mind drifting between the past and the future. She had never truly expected to leave this world alive. Her original mission had been to find her people, but after the storm had separated her from her group, she had begun to think that they were lost forever. She wasn't sure if they would ever be found again. "I don't know," she finally said. "I would like to believe. I could, but it's been so long since I last saw them. We could be light years apart, it's hard to say." Ethan nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "I get it. But if we get that signal out, if someone hears it, maybe we'll find a way out of here. Maybe we won't be stuck on this planet forever." The alien woman smiled slightly, her gaze softening as she looked at him. "Maybe. But even if we don't find my people, I'm not sure I'd be alone anymore." Ethan looked at her, puzzled. "What do you mean?" She tilted her head, considering how to explain. "I've been alone for a long time. My people are always on the move. We travel, we learn, but we rarely settle down. I've never had a companion. And even when I did, it was never quite like this." He raised an eyebrow, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "What? Like we're not both stuck here in this shelter together?" She laughed softly, shaking her head. "Exactly. Strange, isn't it? How do people from completely different places, different worlds, could end up here, together, in a place like this?" Ethan chuckled. "Yeah, I never thought I'd be sitting here talking to an alien, sharing food and waiting for a signal, but here we are." There was a brief silence before he added, "I'm glad you're here. I don't think I would have made it this long without someone to talk to." Her heart stirred at his words. She had always prided herself on her independence, on her ability to survive alone. But hearing him say that he was glad she was here, that he needed her well, it made her feel something she hadn't expected. She had always thought of herself as someone who could live without relying on others. But now, sitting here with Ethan, she realized that wasn't the case. She didn't want to be alone anymore. "Me too," she replied quietly. "I didn't think I needed anyone either, but I'm glad I'm not alone anymore." Ethan smiled warmly, and the alien woman could feel a shift in the air between them. It was small, but it was their connection that had grown in the silence of the days they had spent together. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about something deeper, something unspoken, but real. As the stars above twinkled in the vast sky, the two of them sat in silence once again, side by side. It was a comfortable silence, filled with the knowledge that they had both found something unexpected in the other. It didn't matter where they came from or where they were going. For now, they were not alone. The alien woman knew that their journey wasn't over. The signal they had sent might not lead to anything. But for the first time in a long while, she felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this shelter, this moment in time, wasn't just a place of survival. It was the beginning of something new, and she was no longer walking that path alone. The sun began to rise over the desert, casting long shadows across the shelter and painting the sky in shades of gold and orange. The storm had passed, and the air felt still and calm, a welcome change after the chaos of the past few days. Inside the shelter, the alien woman and Ethan were waking up to another quiet morning. It had been several days since the distress signal had been sent, and though they had not received a response, neither of them seemed willing to give up hope. Ethan sat at the small table, cleaning the equipment they had used to repair the shelter's communication system. His movements were slow, as though the weight of time was beginning to catch up with him. He hadn't said much in the past few hours, lost in thought. The alien woman watched him, sensing the shift in his mood. The uncertainty was always there, lurking beneath the surface. Neither of them knew what would happen next, but it was clear that the waiting was taking its toll. "Do you think they'll answer?" she asked softly, her voice breaking the silence that had settled between them. Ethan looked up from his work. Meeting her gaze was a flicker of something in his eyes. Hope, perhaps, or the faintest trace of doubt. "I don't know," he said quietly. "I wish I could say for sure, but it's been days now. I thought we'd hear something by now." The alien woman nodded. She understood his frustration. She, too, had been waiting for some kind of sign that they weren't the last living beings in the galaxy. The quiet of the desert outside felt oppressive, at times as though the world had forgotten them. But there was something different about this morning. A shift in the air that made her feel like they weren't entirely alone. The shelter, though small and humble, now felt like a place where hope could grow. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were living. And in that quiet, they were starting to build something new. "I believe someone will come," she said after a moment. Her words were calm, but there was a certainty in her tone. "We just have to keep going. We can't stop now." Ethan's expression softened as he looked at her. "I don't know how you do it. You've been through so much, but you still believe. It's like you're made of something. ... stronger." The alien woman smiled, though it was a small, wistful smile. "I wasn't always this way," she admitted. "I've had my moments of doubt too. My people believe in hope, in the idea that no matter how dark the world gets, there's always a way forward. Even when it feels like everything is lost." Ethan leaned back in his chair, thinking about her words. He had never been part of a people like that, people who survived not just because they had to, but because they believed in something greater than themselves. His own people, before everything fell apart, had been much like him, pragmatic, practical, focused on survival. He admired the alien woman's faith in something beyond mere survival. It made him wonder if maybe he had lost something important along the way. "Maybe I've forgotten how to hope," he said quietly. "I don't know what it's like to keep believing when everything seems to fall apart." The alien woman looked at him, her expression thoughtful. "It's not easy, but hope is something we choose, not something we wait for. It's about finding meaning, even when the world seems empty. You've been alone for so long, but you've kept going. That's hope." 2. Ethan didn't respond right away. Her words hung in the air, settling into his thoughts. He hadn't thought about it that way before. In his mind, survival had always been about pushing forward, doing whatever it took to stay alive. But maybe, just maybe, there was more to it than that. Before he could say anything else, the alien woman stood up, walking over to the small window. She gazed out at the desert, her eyes scanning the horizon. The winds had died down, and the landscape before her looked calm, almost peaceful. But beneath that calm, she could feel the pulse of life's the energy of the planet waiting to be discovered, waiting to be embraced. "I'm going to check the equipment again," she said, her voice steady. "I think it might be time to try again." Ethan watched her as she moved toward the communications panel. Her confidence was inspiring, even contagious. He stood up and joined her, his thoughts clearer now. "I'll help. If we're doing this together, we're not just waiting for a signal, we're creating one." The alien woman looked at him, her eyes gleaming with the spark of understanding. "Exactly. Together." They worked in silence for a few moments there, hands moving in a synchronized dance of cooperation. The alien woman guided him through the steps of recalibrating the equipment, showing him how to adjust the frequency and strengthen the signal. Though they had done this before, it felt different now. There was no longer any doubt between them. This was a shared mission, shared purpose. As they finished the adjustments, the communication panel blinked to life, the screen flickering, with static before clearing to reveal a faint signal. The alien woman's breath caught in her throat. Was it possible? Had someone finally heard them? Ethan stepped closer, his heart pounding in his chest. "Do you think it's before he could finish his sentence?" The static shifted again, and then an unmistakable voice crackled through the speakers. "This is Commander Kira of the Galactic Fleet. We've received your distress signal. Hold on, help is on the way." Both of them stood there, staring at the screen in stunned silence. The voice was clear, urgent, and filled with promise. A wave of relief washed over the alien woman as she turned to Ethan, her face lighting up with a smile. "We're not alone," she said softly, her voice filled with wonder. Ethan could hardly believe it. "We did it," he whispered, almost in disbelief. "We're going to make it out of here." The alien woman nodded, her eyes still locked on the screen. This is just the beginning. And for the first time since they had met, both of them felt a sense of certainty that they were not alone. Not anymore. The days that followed felt like a dream to Ethan and the alien woman. The response from Commander Kira had given them both a new sense of purpose, a reason to keep going. The shelter, which had once seemed like a prison, now felt like a temporary home, just a place to rest while they waited for the rescue that was coming. The promise of help was enough to lift their spirits and fill them with a renewed sense of hope. Ethan spent his days working with the alien woman to repair and maintain the shelter's systems. The calm after the storm was a welcome change, but the quiet also allowed for more reflection. They had both come a long way from the first day they met, two strangers brought together by fate, each with their own story of survival. Now they were bound by something Mara shared purpose, and a growing bond between them. "I can't believe it's finally happening," Ethan said one morning, looking out at the clear sky through the shelter's small window. The wind had picked up again, but it was nothing like the sandstorm they had endured days before. The world outside felt peaceful, almost serene. The alien woman nodded, standing beside him. "It feels unreal, doesn't it? We've been waiting for so long, and now it feels like everything is changing." They stood there for a moment, taking in the sight of the desert, now calm and quiet, as if it too were holding its breath. The alien woman had been trained to survive in harsh environments, but even she couldn't deny the beauty of the scene. The sun rose slowly in the distance, casting golden light over the endless sand dunes. "You know," she said softly, turning to face Ethan, "I've never really stopped to appreciate the view before. I've always been too focused on surviving to look at the world around me." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You've never stopped to look at the view? I can't imagine living that way." The alien woman smiled faintly. "When you live in a place like this, you focus on surviving, on getting from one day to the next. The world around you is just background noise." "I get that," Ethan said, his voice quiet. "I've spent so much time trying to just survive that. I've forgotten what it feels like to really live." They shared a look, and for the first time, the weight of their shared experiences felt lighter. They weren't just surviving anymore, they were living. They had each other now, and for the first time, it felt like they were part of something bigger than the isolation they had both known for so long. After a few moments, the alien woman turned back to the equipment, her expression becoming more serious. "We still have a lot of work to do before the rescue team arrives. We need to make sure we're ready." Ethan nodded. "Right, we've come this far. We can't stop now." The next few hours were spent preparing. They made sure the shelter was secure, checked the equipment, and stocked up on food and water. Every task they did felt more meaningful now, as if it was all leading up to something important. It was strange to think that not long ago they had been strangers, each lost in their own world, unsure if anyone else was out there. But now they were working together, united by a shared goal and the knowledge that help was on the way. By the time the sun began to set, they were both tired but content. The work had been hard, but it had given them both a sense of purpose. The alien woman sat down on one of the benches, wiping the sweat from her brow, while Ethan stretched out on the floor, staring up at the ceiling. "You know," Ethan said, after a long silence, his voice thoughtful, "I never thought I'd be here doing this. I thought I was the last human alive, thought I was going to die alone on this planet." The alien woman turned to him, her gaze softening. "I thought the same. I thought I was the only one left of my people. It's strange how much we can believe something when we're alone for so long." Ethan nodded. "Yeah, it's like you convince yourself that there's no hope, that everything is over. But then something changes. You meet someone, you hear a voice on a radio, and suddenly you realize that maybe you're not as alone as you thought." The alien woman smiled slightly. "That's the power of hope. It can make us see things in a different way." Ethan chuckled softly. "You've got a lot of faith in that." "Hope, don't you?" She shrugged. "Sometimes it's all we have." He thought about that for a moment before sitting up. "I'm starting to believe in it again. Maybe it's because of you." The alien woman blinked, surprised by his words. "Me," he nodded. "You've kept believing?"
Yes.
"Even when everything seemed lost?"
Ash.
"You've kept going, and that's what kept me going too." For a moment, neither of them said anything. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was filled with an understanding that had grown between them, a quiet connection that neither of them had expected but both welcomed. They had come to depend on each other, and in doing so, they had found something they hadn't realized they needed. "We're not alone anymore," the alien woman said softly, "and that changes everything." Ethan smiled, the weight of his past loneliness lifting just a little. "No, we're not. And it does change everything." The stars began to twinkle in the dark sky, shining bright against the deep blue of the evening. The world outside had changed, and so had their world within the shelter. They were no longer two strangers fighting for survival. They were partners now, and whatever came next, they would face it together. The sound of distant engines reached, their ears faint at first, but growing louder with each passing moment. The rescue team was coming. The alien woman turned to Ethan, her eyes full of determination. "We're ready," she said, her voice filled with certainty. Ethan stood up, his heart racing. "We are." And as they walked toward the entrance of the shelter, ready to face whatever awaited them, they both knew one thing for certain. This was just the beginning of something new, a new chapter in their lives. In the beginning of a future they would share together.